in the court.
And thank you, Nico, on the back end.
This is Judge Saban, and not only was he the original trial judge, he was the trial judge in Mumia's appeal. A little over 4 years ago, Mumia had the opportunity to get back in court, finally. And this was on the basis of the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court ruling that found that when Ronald Castile was the DA, he later heard a case of Terrence Williams as a state judge, and he should not have done that, showing bias. Now, Mumia's case was able to come back to court in this building starting in April 2016. We filled these courtrooms, over and over and over again. It took them until December 2018, and during this time, Larry Krasner came into office. And they must have had to go back to the DA's office, I don't know how many times, to drag out hundreds and hundreds of boxes of evidence. They were able to get enough to show bias, not directly connected to the Williams case, but to show bias.
I was just an elementary school-aged child. I was young. I didn't really know very much about politics, but there was a friend of mine who lived down the street, and his family were Mennonites. Now, you may not know what a Mennonite is. A Mennonite is a very conservative brand of Protestant Christianity. It's closely linked to the Amish. Mennonites are allowed to have electricity, but they're a very, very conservative religious sect. And I had this friend who lived down the street, and his family, they were fanatical Mennonites. Every year they went to an anti-abortion rally in Washington, D.C. His mother was actually learning to be a Mennonite minister and was taking like evening courses to learn to be a Mennonite minister. They were from some other part of the country, but they had moved to my little town because the specific type of Mennonite church that they wanted to attend was in the little town that I went to. His family were religious fanatics, very, very dedicated Mennonites. They had a TV, but they had no antenna because they didn't want to have non-religious broadcasting in their house. They had a car, but it was a white van. It had to be white, could be black or white because they couldn't have a fancy car. Very, very religious folks. And I had to have only been like 9 or 10 years old. My friend down the street, I was talking to him and I said, hey, you want to come over this weekend, or whatever. My friend, my Mennonite friend who lived up the street from where I lived in my little tiny town in Ohio, he said, no, can't come over this weekend because my mom and my dad and my brothers and my sisters were all driving to Philadelphia this weekend. And I said, why are you going to Philadelphia? And forgive the insensitivity. But what my friend said to me, he said, we're going to Philadelphia because there's this black guy who's going to get the death penalty, and he didn't do it. And I said, oh, okay. And, his church, the Mennonites, they're opposed to the death penalty. I didn't think anything of it. I knew that, my friend, just like they went to a big anti-abortion rally every year, just like they, they were very religious and didn't have an antenna on their television. I just figured, okay, not a big deal. But now, years later, I know who, quote unquote, this black guy was. It was Mumia Abu Jamal. And do people know the name Mumia Abu Jamal? A Marxist revolutionary activist in Philadelphia, a radio journalist for an independent black radio station, an ally of the MOVE organization. And he was on death row. And in 1996, it looked like Mumia Abu Jamal was going to get the death penalty. He was going to be executed. And forces from all over the world convened on Philadelphia. Hundreds of thousands of people came to Philadelphia. And the Pope spoke up and said that Mumia should not be executed. And France, the French government, spoke up and said that Mumia should not be executed. And in an amazing moment, forces from all over the world came together and prevented Mumia Abu Jamal from getting the death penalty. And Mumia Abu Jamal is still alive. He's, not going to get out of prison anytime soon. He's in prison, but he's still alive. Mumia was a cab driver. Mumia Abu Jamal was a cab driver. He was driving down the road. He saw that his brother had been pulled over by a police officer. So he stopped his car to see what was going on, got out of his car, and then, according to a number of witnesses, what happened is another person ran up to the scene and shot the police officer. Officer Faulkner was his name, killed him, and Officer Faulkner was murdered. There was a woman who was a witness, and she saw this other man run up and pull the trigger and shoot this police officer. And they did ballistics tests, and they showed that the bullets that were in the police officer did not match the bullets that would have come from the gun that Mumia had in his cab for self-defense that he carried with him. They didn't match. But regardless, Mumia was arrested for having killed Officer Faulkner and charged with the murder of Officer Faulkner. And he didn't get a fair trial. He wanted to represent himself. They didn't allow him to represent himself. They had police officers and security guards get up and testify that he had confessed to killing Officer Faulkner when he was in the hospital, that he'd shouted, "I killed the guy, I killed him," when he was in the hospital, but he didn't do that. They later recanted their testimony. They didn't actually say that. The judge who presided over the case was overheard by the court reporter saying that, "I want to fry this N-word." The details of the case just got uglier and uglier and uglier. And one of the key witnesses was a woman who had been arrested for being a prostitute, for being a sex worker, and didn't know the situation. And the police cornered her and threatened her family, and basically got her to say that Mumia had pulled the trigger when he hadn't. And he was convicted. And during the trial, one of the main points of argument against Mumia was the fact that he had been a Black Panther. They held up an article he had written for the Black Panther newspaper where he quoted the Little Red Book. And in the Little Red Book, Mao said, "Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun." Well, the article was about how the United States had wiped out the Native Americans. And because they had guns and the Native Americans didn't, they had wiped them out, and how armed self-defense was a necessity. But they used this article where he had quoted Mumia to say that where Mumia had quoted Mao Zedong to say that he must be guilty. And the judge in the case, the judge was, Judge Sabo, had been a former police officer and was actually a member of the Fraternal Order of Police. So he clearly didn't have an impartial view of the case. And the judge actually did something illegal at the trial. And he told the jury, he said, "Don't worry." He said, "Don't worry about convicting him, because he's going to have appeal after appeal after appeal. So if you find him guilty, you're not killing this man." Now, that's illegal. A judge can't say that to the jury. But this judge, who was a member of the Fraternal Order of Police, said that to the jury. Said, "Don't worry about convicting him. Don't worry about convicting him. Don't worry about convicting him. He's going to have appeal after appeal after appeal." And so the jury found Mumia Abu Jamal guilty, and he was sentenced to death. And it looked like Mumia Abu Jamal was going to die. And protests in support of Mumia started. I believe it was the Partisan Defense Committee that first started protesting for Mumia. They're linked to the Spartacist League. They're kind of a small Trotskyist organization. And then the MOVE organization, which was a Black revolutionary group in Philadelphia that Mumia had been affiliated with, PAM Africa, Ramona Africa, they were protesting for him. and the International Action Center of Ramsey Clark, who I used to work with, former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark, and the Workers' World Party, they got involved, and the Revolutionary Communist Party and Refuse and Resist, they got involved. And pretty soon there were protests to free Mumia Abu-Jamal, to stop the execution happening all across the planet. It was a very, very big moment in 1995. It looked like Mumia Abu-Jamal was going to die. It looked like they were going to execute him. And people were very, very upset. But I know people who gave their lives to free Mumia Abu-Jamal. I knew people who quit their jobs. I know people who dropped out of school. I know people who just decided, no, I'm going to do everything I can to free Mumia Abu-Jamal. And, it was one of the big cases of the Gen X radicals, you could call them. This was before 9/11, before the Iraq War, before Bush. Bill Clinton was president. And there were a lot of people that said, I am going to do everything I can to save Mumia's life. And in 1995, when thousands and thousands of people convened on Philadelphia, I think it was well over 100,000 people convened on Philadelphia, when the Pope said that he was opposing Mumia's execution, when the government of France said they were opposing Mumia's execution, when thousands of Mennonites and Amish people came to support Mumia, thousands of Catholic priests and nuns came to support Mumia, lots of young anarchists came out for Mumia, lots of old communists came out for Mumia, black revolutionaries came out for Mumia. The government backed down. And they didn't execute him. And they kept trying to execute him again, but they just got scared. And to this day, Mumia Abu-Jamal is alive. Mumia is alive. He's not dead. He's in prison. It would require a new trial for him to be released, but he's not dead. And that is a testament to the strength of popular movements. It was a moment where so many people from so many different political viewpoints and strata came together to say that they wanted Mumia to not be killed, to not be executed. And Michael Moore supported Mumia, and Noam Chomsky supported Mumia, and so many progressives and so many people came together, and it was a coalition. My friend, that friend, that kid of who lived up the street from me, very conservative, very Republican, very anti-abortion, but his church was against the death penalty, and this was a very high-profile death penalty case. So the Mennonites, they mobilized their people. And, a lot of the black nationalists who came out to support Mumia, from the Nation of Islam, a lot of them are very opposed to gay marriage. A lot of them are very socially conservative, but they saw Mumia as their brother. And they said, we're not going to let the white man kill a black revolutionary. And they came out to support Mumia. And a lot of Catholic priests and nuns, very conservative folks, they came out to support Mumia. And a lot of Stalinists and tankies, right, from the Communist Party USA and the Revolutionary Communist Party and the Workers' World Party, they came out to support Mumia. A lot of Trotskyists from the International Socialist Organization and the Spartacist League and the Socialist Workers' Party, they came out to support Mumia. And vegetarians came out to support Mumia. There was actually a mobilization of vegetarians because Mumia was a vegetarian, because his group, the MOVE organization, was a vegetarian organization. There was vegetarians that came out for Mumia. Because, Mumia was an environmentalist, you had a lot of environmental groups that came out for Mumia. You had a lot of people that were opposed to the death penalty who came out for Mumia. You had Germans. There was a whole crew of Germans who flew in from Germany to come out to support Mumia Abu-Jamal. You had a whole crew of people from France who came in to support Mumia. and a real united front was created. Labor unions got involved. All kinds of community groups got involved, and hundreds of thousands of people came to Philadelphia to march, and millions of people around the world decided to take a stand. And it seemed like so many voices were saying to the government of Pennsylvania and the governor, Tom Ridge, who went on to become the head of the Department of Homeland Security under Bush, they were saying, do not execute Mumia. And the execution was stopped. Mumia was not killed. He was not executed. What's particularly interesting is a lot of people wonder, how was it that in this period of the 1990s, when the Soviet Union had fallen, and there was so many retreats and defeats for the revolutionary working class movement, neoliberal economics was unfolding around the world, and Bill Clinton was in office, and he was doing everything he could to repudiate the left. And during his presidential campaign, he'd suspended his campaign to fly back to Arkansas to execute a black man. And how was it that the execution of Mumia was prevented? Well, it was prevented primarily through the creation of a united front of people who didn't agree with each other on a lot of different things, coming together around one single demand: stop the execution, free Mumia Abu-Jamal. And on top of that, it was prevented by the fact that the black community was in a fighting mood, right? A couple years beforehand, you had the LA Rebellion. The LA Rebellion had happened a couple years before. And, Los Angeles had gone up in flames in response to the, police brutality being committed and recorded. And because the black community was in a fighting mood, and there was fear that there would be rioting among the black community, that they would go out into the streets, fight the police, because there was a wave of black militancy, that certainly contributed to the fear on the part of the ruling class. And on top of that, the next year you had the Million Man March, a huge black nationalist rally in Washington, D.C., led by Minister Louis Farrakhan. And that rally was addressed not just by black revolutionary leaders, but also by the Speaker of the Cuban Parliament, and by, revolutionaries from across the planet. Absolutely. And it was that mobilization, the international pressure put on the United States, with so many people around the world standing up for Mumia. And the mobilization, the popular mobilization of activists from around the United States to free Mumia. And the fact that the black community, the oppressed black nation in the United States that, has been suffering so horrifically, the fact that they came together in support of Mumia. All of that prevented the ruling class from executing Mumia Abu-Jamal. And it was a moment where popular power prevailed. And I was too young. I couldn't really be part of it. I do remember when I was in college, Mumia had a court date, and so I drove to Philadelphia with some of my comrades. This would have been like 2007, 2008. I went to one of Mumia's court dates. That was years after this. I mean, at that point, they weren't on the brink of executing him. But a lot of people gave their lives, gave their time to organizing to free Mumia Abu-Jamal, and they did it, and they won. And Mumia is still alive. And that is a strength of our movement. That's a strength of popular power. And a lot of people our age don't even know who Mumia is. I'm only in my early 30s, and a lot of people don't know who Mumia is, and they don't know how Mumia was freed. And I think a lot of these people that are into cancel culture don't understand that if the way Mumia had been freed, if the movement back then had acted the way the movement acts now, Mumia wouldn't have been free. If the Trotskyites had said, "Oh, I can't march for Mumia because there's Stalinists there," If feminists had said, I can't march for Mumia because there's Catholic priests and nuns and black nationalists there that are sexist, I can't march for Mumia. You know, if atheists had said, oh, I can't march for Mumia, not with those Mennonites there, not with those Catholics there. You know, if black nationalists had said, oh, I can't march for Mumia, not with those, you know, those white people that don't agree with me there. If the attitude had been the way the attitude is now, if it had been the cancel culture left that had dominated things, Mumia would be dead. But the reason that Mumia is alive is because people overcame their differences. They created a real united front. They got over their differences, and they said, we can agree on one thing. Don't kill Brother Mumia. And they came together. They came together, and they stopped his execution. And it was a victory. They were ready to kill this guy. And they are still angry about the fact that they haven't killed Mumia Abu Jamal. There's a book called Murdered by Mumia. And it was ghost written by, I can't even remember his name, this clown who works for MSNBC now, Mark Smirkonish. And he wrote it, he ghost wrote it for Maureen Faulkner. She wrote that, she didn't really write it. Mark Smirkonish wrote it. Smirkonish wrote this book. He ghost wrote it. And there's just blatant lies in the book. Blatant lies about the case. One of the most blatant lies in the book is that she tells this story. She says, wow, one day when they brought in the bloody shirt of her dead husband as evidence, Mumia turned and looked at her and grinned evilly as she cried as she saw the bloody shirt of her husband. Well, if you check the trial transcripts, Mumia was removed from the courtroom. He wasn't in court the day that the shirt was brought in. So that's just a made-up lie. Right? Mumia wasn't even in court for a lot of his trial. They removed him from the courtroom because he was demanding to represent himself. He was so loudly objecting to how unfair the trial was. So that whole story that Smirkonish made up, it's not true. It was just made up for the book to make Mumia look like a monster. Other details of the case are not included, like the fact that there was ballistic tests that showed that Mumia's gun had not fired the bullets. Like the fact that the only testimony that Mumia had actually done it, the only eyewitnesses have recanted and said that he didn't do it, right? And then said that they were threatened by the police and intimidated into saying that Mumia had committed the murder. And, Fox News and the right wing and even a lot of mainstream media, a lot of liberals, Bill Clinton was supporting the execution of Mumia. And in fact, Bill Clinton had the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, I believe. And he had it in Philadelphia, from what I understand. And he even had, Maureen Faulkner, the widow of the officer that Mumia was accused of killing, on the stage with him, just to make a statement that he supported killing Mumia Abu Jamal. But it didn't matter. Didn't matter. The power of the people was too strong. The power of the people was too strong. And Mumia Abu Jamal, to this day, his heart is still beating, and he is alive. And they haven't been able to kill Mumia Abu Jamal because of popular power, because people knew how to organize and struggle. And now I want to show you all one of my proudest moments, one of the proudest moments of my life. And it's on tape. And I actually have the clip here for you. And this is me back in 2014, I think it was 2015, I spoke at a political prisoner's benefit. At a political prisoner's benefit where money was raised for Mumia Abu Jamal and his legal defense, for the Move 9, for Jamil Al-Amin, for other Black revolutionary political prisoners. I went to a political prisoner's benefit, and they invited me as a speaker. And so I came and I presented an award, or not really an award. You'll see. I gave a gift to Pam Africa and Ramona Africa, two of the leaders of the movement to free Mumia Abu Jamal, two members of the Move organization that was firebombed in Philadelphia. This is one of the proudest moments of my life.
Poster. It says, remember, We are in here for you,
That's
and you
right.
are out here for us.
That's right, Art.
There's no two people that better exemplify the spirit, that is expressed on this poster than these two individuals.
Gosh, thank you.
Caleb.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, to go through so much, to be part of a chosen family of dedicated activists in Philadelphia, to see members of your family locked up and gunned down and so ruthlessly persecuted, but to keep fighting every day, to keep raising your head up high and demanding justice, this takes a strength of character that so many of us can only really aspire. This isn't a new work of art. It's a reprint of a poster that was circulated about 100 years ago. At the top of the poster, it actually says, fellow workers, because it was put out by the Industrial Workers of the World, a radical labor union 100 years ago whose members were locked in prison for speaking up and fighting for justice. There's some people here who know me, and they know I can be a little bit of a firebrand. I don't always say things the way people want me to or do things exactly the way people have always done them. But there's one rule that I think that we can take from the last generation of activists, and they got it from the previous generation of activists, and they got it from the last generation of activists. It's one of the most important rules for anyone to learn when they come into the movement, and that's that if at any point the state comes for somebody who's fighting against capitalism or fighting against racism or fighting against the unjust wars or fighting for equality, if the powers that be come for anyone in our movement, all of us have a duty to do everything in our power to win their freedom and bring them home. Doesn't matter what party you're in, doesn't matter what tactical decisions you've made, doesn't matter what books you read or what arguments or disagreements you've had in the past, doesn't matter if you're an anarchist or a Pan-Africanist or a Trotskyist or a Stalinist or an anthropologist or an orthodontist. Whatever you are, if the state comes for you and you're a fighter, we all have a duty to be on your side.
Yep, that's one of the most proud moments of my life, when I was able to present that gift. The poster, one I gave to Pam Africa, one I gave to Ramona Africa, to stand in solidarity with the MOVE organization and with Mumia Jamal, was a beautiful moment. And the point that I made in my remarks that you just heard there, when I had the opportunity to present this gift to them, was that we have a duty to not let the capitalist government come for anybody. And at this point, I think there's a lot of people that need to be standing up for Julian Assange, but aren't. There's a lot of people who call themselves socialists who won't stand up for Julian Assange. Julian Assange is rotting away in prison in the United Kingdom. And they're on the verge of extraditing him to the United States so they can torture him just for revealing war crimes. And we all need to be standing up for Julian Assange. And the same for Leonard Peltier, the Native American activist who's been falsely accused of killing FBI agents. The data shows that those FBI agents were killed by friendly fire. And it was the FBI agents killed other FBI agents. It was friendly fire. Leonard Peltier did not kill those FBI agents at the Wounded Knee standoff, at the standoff. But regardless, Leonard Peltier is still in federal prison. And there's many political prisoners in the United States. We always hear about political prisoners in Russia or political prisoners in China. There are political prisoners in America. And the Center for Political Innovation calls for a blanket amnesty for all political prisoners. All political prisoners. From the Black Liberation Army, from the Puerto Rican liberation organizations, from some of the May 19th Communist Organization, Weather Underground, blanket amnesty. Blanket amnesty for all of them. Because we all know that the FBI killed a lot of black revolutionaries during this time period. We all know that the police departments around the country framed up and murdered a lot of revolutionaries during this time period. None of them went to jail. So in order to heal the wounds of the country, in order to bring the country together, we need to free all political prisoners. In what year was it? 96 or 93, whenever they signed the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland, in Northern Ireland. What was one of the things that the British government did is they freed all of the IRA fighters who were locked up. Now, they didn't say that, oh, we approve of what you did during the Troubles. We didn't approve of what you did, but it was to heal the country, to heal Northern Ireland. They let those folks go home. And that's what they need to do in the United States. That's what they need to do in the United States. They need to send them home. Free all political prisoners, all Puerto Rican liberation fighters, all Black Panther and Black Liberation Army and Black Nationalist Revolutionary Fighters, all the MOVE organization members, all of the white left adventurist communist groups, May 19th Communist Organization, Revolutionary Armed Task Force, free them all. Free them all. Let them go home to their families. Let's admit that the U.S. government did far worse things than any of these people could ever have dreamed of doing, killed millions of people in Vietnam, suppressed with their COINTELPRO program, the Black Liberation Movement, killed Fred Hampton, killed Bobby Hutton and Mark Clark. And let's be real about this, right? Blanket amnesty for all political prisoners. I think that is a very, very legit demand.